Hello, welcome to Video Diary 2016 Part 9, or Episode 9, and obviously we're going to talk about Victoria Embankment Gardens, but also a bit about dating, the Anglosphere, Brexit, I don't know, anything else I think about, the G20, whatever. Okay, so stuff. But this is very near Temple Tube Station, and we'll start with Victoria Embankment Gardens just near the Lawyers' Temple district. And this little statue here is John Stuart Mill, the political and philosophical writer on liberty and representative government, a sort of pioneer of freedom, if you like, or at least democracy of sorts. And you see, this part of Victoria Embankment Gardens is only a little garden, but in fact the whole embankment bit goes on for a long way, and I'm going to walk along all the gardeny bit. Another little statue from the Children of the Loyal Temperance Legion in memory of work done for the temperance caused by Lady Henry Somerset. There we go, June 1896. I was thirsty and he gave me drink. That is a water fountain, disused. All water fountains pretty much are disused in London for health and safety reasons. It's better to die of thirst than to risk the small chance of catching something. Especially on a hot summer's day like this was. I'm afraid my camera jiggles a bit because I do have a camera stabilizer, but I don't want to use it because it draws attention to the camera, which I don't want, and also I can't get it to balance anyway. so there you go. Another statue with someone hanging around beside it. This is Edward Forster. He founded the elementary school system in Britain, so quite a person. I don't know how he did it or what. How does one go about that? Maybe he was an MP or something, I don't really know. But these parks are full of interesting statues, or at least statues of interesting people. Temple Station, dead ahead there. You can just see it past the tree. Temple is on the Circle and District lines of the Underground, but it's close to the Strand and Fleet Street and Blackfriars Station. So just walking past the tube station at the moment. In fact, I didn't point my camera right at it. Just forgot about it, basically. This is a bit of a strange place on top of a building. To my mind, it could do with some decoration up here. It's a little bit bare somehow. Somebody's down and outing in it anyway. But you do get a bit of a view of the river through the trees. See if I can get that. I was thinking about dating because if you've seen my previous videos, you'll know I'm getting divorced, somewhat against my will, but that's life. So I've got to think, well, what now? I'll just get depressed if I'm sitting on my own all the time, I suppose. So, and anyway, it's a lot more financially efficient to be a couple than it is to be a single, especially if both parties are working. And that is kind of what I wanted to talk about. The British attitude to money, and especially British women's attitude, I suppose. I suppose they will talk about British men's attitude. But I was interested to see that a bank has done a study. We're going to go up that little alley in a moment. The bank has done a study of questions that people want to ask on a date but don't dare usually. unless they don't mind sabotaging the date, I suppose. And it was very interesting, actually, and it tells you a lot about people's attitudes to money in this country, and it's one reason why I think it's one reason why I've always had a bit of a problem with dating English women, because it seems to me that, okay, we're all interested in money, we've got to live, but there's something about their attitude to it which is that they want your money. Basically, they want handouts or something like that. I suppose women instinctively expect you to be able to support them, and it was like that up until the 20th century. Now both parties have to work. I guess in some earlier centuries as well, both parties had to work, but not necessarily in paid jobs until parts of the Industrial Revolution came around. But it's very much at the forefront of their minds. Some of these questions, okay, the first one that they'd like to ask is, do you believe in love at first sight? I have actually been asked that one in the past. I mean, for what it's worth, I think my answer is not really, but maybe. I believe in lust at first sight. I mean, that's a definite. Love, I think, well, maybe it happens, I don't know. For me, I'd want to think about it a bit, you know. The reason I'm going up this alley, by the way, is that there are some Roman baths here. It's not the most spectacular exhibition in the world. In fact, if you ask me, it's incredibly amateur. But the basement of this house has a Roman bath. You may view it through the window unless you've booked an appointment, okay? Not going to read that, so too small anyway. But you just go in here. Now I tried to get a view of it, but there were too many reflections from the window, as you'll see. You can just see me there with my camera, but you can see a bit, I suppose, I don't know. See my reflection, and that's about it. Can we put the camera up to the window? What can I see? It wasn't helped by the fact that I couldn't see. It's just focusing on the glass. It's a bit hopeless. You can see some vague thing down there. So that's what you can see. Great, eh? So back down to the embankment, Victoria Embankment Road. And we'll just carry on in the same direction that we were walking before. So, other questions that people would like to ask on a date. Okay. Number 2, are you over your exes? Me, not really yet, but it's early days. How many holidays do you go on per year? You can see the money starting to come in already at number 3. I mean, I would go on holidays, but I'm always in conflict because I would want to save the money as well. I've got to figure out how I'm going to live after I retire in hopefully about 10 years' time, or hopefully immediately with a fortune if I win the lottery. But, you know, let's be realistic. Do you have a criminal record, they like to ask. I mean, are you going to get a truthful answer out of that one on a first date? Do you own property? Question 5. How about that? This is what people would like to ask, but are too afraid. Everything you want to know about your prospects, finances, but are afraid to ask. That might as well be what it is, really. This building, by the way, is Somerset House. It used to be where the records of births, deaths and marriages were stored, but now it's an art gallery come museum place. I did wander in there once and never quite found the exhibition. There's corridors and stuff all over the place. It's very big, and it's going to be, there's a big section of it going to be revamped soon at a cost of millions of pounds. But it's quite a nice building anyway. And around the back of it there's a courtyard with fountains and stuff in it. It's worth wandering around, and you can probably, once you find the gallery in there, you can probably spend quite a long time in there. And a lot of the exhibitions are free, and some you pay for. Sort of a couple of lion statues up there, very worn down, they're very old, and the acid rain or pigeons defecating on them have kind of worn them out over the centuries. They're looking a bit forlorn now. This is Waterloo Bridge, by the way. So we're just across the bridge from Waterloo Station. And it's not that far to the right from Holborn Station. And you can see there's the famous stuff of London. Big Ben, and on the left there is the London Eye wheel. Ferris wheel thing. So you can get up to Waterloo Bridge there. Oh, he was asking me directions, so I had to put the phone away and look at my map. There we go. Just carry on under the bridge, and just here, Savoy Place, there is another statue. This one's interesting if you're a techno freak like me, or a tech freak. This is Michael Faraday, the inventor of the induction coil, the dynamo, basically who made electric motors practical. There it is. And there's his special symbol, in case you don't know. The left-hand rule. When asked what was the point of his of what use were his inventions, he replied, "Of what use is a baby?" The point being, you don't really know how things are going to turn out. And if you don't do the research, you don't get the benefits. Sometimes you do the research and you still don't get the benefits. But that's life. Here is another part of Victoria Embankment Gardens. This is Victoria Embankment Gardens itself. The previous one was called Temple Garden. Got the opening hours there. You see it's open most of the time. Closes around about sunset. Roughly speaking. Or at least in the evenings. The sunset is quite late in the summer and quite early in the winter. This may be one of the nicest parts of the gardens, actually. Another question, how often do you go to the gym? Do you splurge or spend your money, or do you save? People want to know. I suppose these are things you can talk about on a date if you're not sensitive about it. This statue is Arthur Sullivan. I don't know who the woman is, but it's Arthur Sullivan. That is of Gilbert and Sullivan, the operetta writer of the sort of Victorian era. Used to write comedy, sort of opera-typey thingies. Very popular in his day, of course. Camera having trouble with exposure as usual, but anyway, you can see him, more or less. Just to the right here is the Savoy Hotel, so if you're parked there on holiday, you're right by these gardens. This is a sculpture in honour of Richard Doyley Cart, proprietor of the Savoy Theatre. And colleague, well there you go, right. See, on a hot sunny day, people just like to laze about in these gardens. Can't really blame them. Another question, do you want to get married? How many children do you want? Here's another money one. Are you in debt? Robert Rakes, founder of Sunday schools. So all you children who suffer having to go to religious education on a Sunday, it's his fault. Basically. At least in this country. There's no time for yourself, is there? School every flipping day. We sit children down and expect them to do clerical work all day and wonder why they can't behave and why they get bored and decide that learning is painful. I mean, come on. Henry Fawcett. There we go. The Americans call a tap a faucet. I'm not sure if they spell it that way, but anyway, here's the guy. I wonder if he invented it. I don't really know. This is another drinking fountain that doesn't work. Who do you vote for? They want to know. I can understand that. Where would you like to get married? How would you raise your children? How many people have you slept with? Or by that they don't mean slept, of course, it's a euphemism. What is your annual salary? Are you saving for a deposit? That is, do you want to buy a house, and are you actually putting some effort into it, or are you going to put the burden entirely on me? How much do you save per month? These are all understandable questions if you're interested. I mean, to get together as a couple, it is, in a way, kind of sensible, but not on a first date, really. Get to know whether you actually like the person or not. Do you get a bonus at work? Would your parents help pay for a wedding? So this is the British mentality. I don't know how much that translates to other countries. It might well translate to the Anglo countries, the Anglo-Saxon countries. Because I think we kind of think in the same way about money. Perhaps not so much as the Brits, I'm not really sure. The Americans obviously are mad about money, but they're much more positive about it. The Brits kind of feel it's hard to get money and they're always looking for a windfall, like I want to win the lottery or something. The Americans are much more inclined to think, well, let's go and make some money. But it's actually harder to get the funding for a business in Britain than it is in America. Another chap. Wilfrid Lawson, Member of Parliament, for his pure and unworldly life. There. You don't hear of people being called Wilfrid these days. Very high proportion of people have a mobile phone in their hands. Can't sit still for a minute without distracting yourself from yourself. Let's not think, let's browse some rubbish, eh? Let's not experience the park. Let's see what fibs my Facebook friends are telling me about how great their lives are. This is an interesting statue. Or sculpture, I suppose. The camel core. The engagements of said camel core. Some of them. These are the Australians. And who they were. I don't know if that's the ones who were killed. I imagine it probably is. Yeah. To the glorious and immortal memory of the officers and NCOs. There you go. British, Australian, Indian, New Zealand. The Indian ones are not named here, are they? Or maybe they're on this side, along with the New Zealanders. Yeah. British. Oh, there's the British, Brits, and there's the New Zealanders. And the Indians. And just beside that, we have another statue. Rabbi Burns, Robert Burns. The poet. Died in 1796. Not very old. Of course, in those days, poets and the like were inevitably aristocrats because they were the only people who could afford not to be a wage slave and had the time for such idleness. But by all repute, he was a good poet. So there you go. That big building in the background there is Charing Cross Railway Station, believe it or not. Magnificent, actually, isn't it? The front of it isn't in that style at all. The front of it was built at an earlier time. We're coming to the end of Victoria Embankment Gardens, but there's plenty more to see. Yeah, so what I was saying about this money mentality, I have found it difficult to date English women because the ones I've met anyway seem to be kind of less interested in you for the most part, and more interested in what you can do for them. They don't necessarily say it explicitly, but it seems to keep coming across from many of them. I haven't done dating for many years, and I guess the new generation may be different, but I think I'm a bit old to be dating the new generation. So I'll probably have to make do with the usual lot if I get into that again. We're right by Embankment Station, which is on my left here. So you see Temple at one end, Embankment at the other, and there's more further on. There it is. Now we could go under here. I'll just go under here briefly and take a quick look. But we're actually going to turn right briefly and have a look at something else. See, there's a subway and stuff in here if you want to. There's a little supermarket. The railway lines go overhead, by the way, from Charing Cross Station. And this thought about the way Brits think about money is what put me onto made me think about the Anglosphere, or it's one thing that made me think about it. There was a guy in a newspaper talking about it as well this week, interestingly. And Jubilee Bridge, as it's called, footbridge. One of them. There's a pair of them on either side of Hungerford Bridge, which is not in Hungerford. And there's the Playhouse Theatre, doing 1984 at the moment, so you can always get some seats for £19.84 at the moment. Well, there's always a few anyway available, 50 or 100 or so every day. So back to the Embankment station, and we'll just go up here beside the gardens because there's something to see. The Europeans, the EU guys, okay, they, especially the French and Germans, kind of resent the Anglosphere, which is Britain and its friends and allies around the world. They kind of feel that there's a kind of conspiracy. I mean, even the top bureaucrats and those people actually, so I read, are inclined to think about the Anglosphere as a conspiracy to rule the world, which perhaps isn't so far from the truth in a way. But what they don't understand is why the Anglo countries are so close, or that they are. The thing about Britain, America, Australia, New Zealand, even India, Canada, and to a lesser extent other countries of the Commonwealth, is that these countries are very, very close together. We're incredible friends and trust each other totally. Like a lot of these countries, we share intelligence with the Americans, for example. Here is the house of Rudyard Kipling. Lived there for a couple of years. Probably a student renting a flat there, I don't know, Villiers Street. Which is right just down the hill, 100 metres or so from Charing Cross Tube Station. And you can see it's close to Embankment Station. So here we are back at the Playhouse Theatre. There's something else to see here. Americans in particular might be interested in this. I think other allies are not the same as, say, Britain, America, Canada, Australia and so on. These countries are really, really close, and as I say, are not just formal allies, they actually trust each other, and that's why they get along so well, and are so powerful and influential in the world in part. You look at other formal allies such as France and Germany, okay, who are allied through the EU now. Frankly, they don't trust each other an inch, and although they are supposedly allied in the EU, they are in constant competition to dominate the EU for themselves. There is no real love lost between them, and that keeps them weak. Divide and rule, as the British Empire's policy has been in Europe for centuries, and you know, we can carry on fomenting this dissent and between the French and the Germans and others, and keep the EU down. It'll never really work. Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick, lived here in 1849, in this very house. Charing Cross Station behind. And there's more. And in a way, this lack of real cohesion between the countries of Europe is why the European Union will never fully integrate in a successful way without the use of force, in my view, or subversion, like they'll subvert democracy like they're doing. They'll use this stupid single currency to try and unify disparate economies and cause havoc and suffering and hard luck if you happen to be a small country like Greece. Heinrich Heine, German poet and essayist, I know nothing about him except his name, Heinrich, is it? lived there for a short time. And the thing I think Americans will most be interested in is up this rather unprepossessing street. It's nice, sort of Georgian type houses, I suppose they are. I'm no expert on that sort of thing. This is perhaps the main one, so let's have a look. Benjamin Franklin lived here. He came to London and spent some time as an apprentice in a print shop learning a printing trade. And he lived here. And I think it is the last remaining house in the world where he has lived. I may be mistaken, American friends can perhaps put me right on that, but it's certainly the last one in England, or the only one. But I have a feeling it is actually the last one anywhere. He lived in Craven Street. So yeah, the English women and men, I guess, are very materialistic, but on average I don't think they're careful with their money. What they want is money from you to assist them with their lifestyle. So they dream about going on holidays all the time and spending it, and I mean, we'd all like to do that. But if you actually want a safe future, Whitehall Gardens here, you kind of have to do a bit of both. You have to earn enough for a start, which means working. And as a single person, it's hard to earn enough unless you're a top earner. As a couple, if both people are working, you can do that. But then, how are you going to have children if you're both working? Hence, we need loads of immigrants to, keep up the numbers and pay for the pensions and all the rest of it. It's a sort of a paradox, really. Here's another guy, a military guy. Behind him is Horse Guards Hotel, I think it's called. You can see he's a military guy. I've got him looking very serious, going around killing lots of people. We honour our psychopaths here. Outram. I don't know what he's known for. I guess he's a bit before my time. Maybe he was a great hero. I don't know. Never heard of him before. Seeing him in this garden here. There's the hotel. You can see it's an expensive hotel. I don't think I need to tell you that. Okay, just look at it. I mean, this is not Premier Inn or Jury's Inn or anything of that sort. This is if you have to ask how much it costs, you can't afford it. Very nice gardens, this actually. Not very big, but really nice. Tree plus magpie, or two magpies having an argument. Or maybe it's just a friendly conversation, I don't know magpie speak. That tree is getting a bit of help, some benefits. And that sort of failure of European countries to cohere is of course another good reason for Brexit, I think. We really are better, much better suited for the Commonwealth, and those particular countries which are particularly friendly to us. The move to the undemocratic and I think dangerous EU, it was a bad move. I voted for it originally. Well, I didn't vote for it, I was in favour of it originally. But I was too young to vote. But it hasn't worked out. The propaganda is lies, I'm sure. Bartle Frere. Who the heck is he? I don't know. And of course the EU wants to build an army now and subvert NATO, which I think they see again as an Anglo thing. Which in a way I think it probably is, kind of. It's obviously got plenty of other countries, but I think it's dominated by Britain and America, really, as the biggest contributors to it, with France doing pretty well too. Oh, they're not in NATO, are they? But they have their own pretty good army. But you see, the problem with a European army is that it would not owe allegiance to particular countries. It would owe allegiance to the European flag. And as indeed John Stuart Mill wrote once, such armies which don't have loyalty to their country have been used to subjugate liberty all through the ages. I mean, the Romans used to send armies from different countries to suppress other countries which they controlled. That's William Caxton, I think, the printing guy I mentioned, that he set up on Fleet Street. William Tyndale, another printing guy, first translator of the New Testament into English from the Greek. There we go. Born 1484. Executed in 1536. Probably for being a Protestant. I imagine. I don't know. This is what it says on the statue there, on the plaque as well. So although the EU doesn't appear to be malicious at the moment, it's kind of getting all the trappings of it over time, and it's kind of ignoring democracy, and it's kind of using the euro to turn the small countries into tributaries of Germany, especially. Meanwhile, France struggles to wrest power of the currency from Germany, and vice versa, or the Bundesbank anyway. And well, it's not a good way to have an alliance, frankly. It's just in principle, it's just bad, to my mind. Well, enough about that. Anyway, that huge building there, very solid looking, is the Ministry of Defence. You can see there's more gardens in front. We'll be going there in a sec. There's some guys there posing in front. That reminds me, I was going to think about getting some simple yoga exercises just to keep some basic stretching, because I go for walks and stuff, but I don't really do stretches for flexibility or anything as such for strength. And it seems to me yoga is quite good. I used to do little bits of it and I had quite good results from it, really. But I looked online to see if there were some simple exercises. I know there's one sort of set of 5 you can do in almost a single move, and I'll probably end up doing that. But what I found was zillions and zillions of websites recommending all sorts of different beginners exercises, and it just confused me, basically. I don't know. As usual, I will have to think for myself and just not worry too much about it. It's a very grand entrance, isn't it? Yeah. So let's get back to the gardens anyway. Talking about Brexit makes me think about Donald Trump. Is he mad? Well, he's certainly a bit of a rabble-rouser, and he says what people want to hear, I suppose, but he is, for once, a genuinely different option, it seems, from the usual crowd like Hillary Clinton. And a bit like, I think he's talking to the American people who would want Brexit if it was relevant to them, who do want to take control over their own borders and their own lives, and have a government which is actually responsive to them and not to the corporates. And I've listened to interviews where he has said pretty much that. And so I can fully understand people wanting to vote for him. He said worrying things too. This is the Whitehall extension, as you can see. Obviously outside the Ministry of Defence, you expect it to be a military guy. Charles Gordon, killed at Khartoum. This is Gordon of Khartoum. Famous for getting killed, I suppose. Well, helping to liberate certain towns for the British. The name Ladysmith comes to mind, but I don't remember the history of those times very well. Funnily enough, we were not taught it much at school about the British Empire very much, because the left wing have taken over education, and they don't believe in imperialism. And I don't really believe in imperialism anyway, either, but we should be taught proper history. We were taught the Industrial Revolution, however, and that was pretty good. My other school, which I went to before, was teaching European history. So again, not really covering this era. If you want to know about it, you have to read it yourself. Lord Portal of Hungerford. I don't know anything about him, but because it's a modern statue. This statue I find much more interesting. This is the Fleet Air Arm. Made him look like a kind of an angel. I don't know if those wing type things were ever actually used. I think they'd probably be a bit small, I don't know, but so I kind of hope that Donald Trump will get in, because in a way he's perhaps America's last chance to preserve full-on liberty, at least for 4 years. Maybe he can reverse some of the trends and ban corporate lobbying or something like that to make Congress actually representative of the people it's supposed to represent, and indeed the Senate too. These are all the places the Fleet Air Arm fought. River Plate, Taranto, Malta, Narvik. Can't get all these in one shot. To the everlasting memory of all the men and women from the United Kingdom and the British Commonwealth and allied nations who have given their lives while serving in the Royal Naval Air Service and the Fleet Air Arm. More places. Crete, Bismarck, Diego Suarez, North Africa, Sicily, Salerno, Aegean, Normandy, Sabang, South France, Burma, Palembang, Malaya. It goes on and on. It's quite an amazing history, actually. What a time, really. Another one's commemorating or representing the United Nations. And the Korean War, yeah. Can't really see him. Can't do sort of +1 or -1 on the camera's exposure, but there you go. I was given a £40 voucher by my company this week for good customer feedback. So that's pretty cool. I'm probably going to spend it on books. I'll go to a bookshop. Waterstones, perhaps. They seem to have a good selection generally. But one thing I've noticed over the past few years, I suppose since the rise of Amazon, bookshops have been closing all over the place, and the ones that remain are struggling. Because even me, I would half the time rather buy a cheap Kindle. Why pay 15 quid for a book when I can read it anyway for £1 on Kindle sometimes. So obviously bookshops are having a bit of a hard time, but books are still nice, and I think especially if you're going to have children, it's really important to have books in the house as physical books. Chinese dragon, it looks like. The Chindits, Burma, there we go, Burmese dragon. The boldest measures are the safest. The Second World War expeditions into Burma. I suppose all those people are dead now. Maybe not. Maybe there's still some around. Actually, all the First World War veterans are now dead, I believe. There are none left, I think. The last one died. Was it this year or last year? Killed in active service, the man who formed the Chindits, or the Chindit, commander of the Chindit campaign anyway, and helped with the formation of the Israeli Defence Forces as well. And more units. And see, we're still walking along beside the river. Now there is something to look at here. It's worth crossing the road here, because this is quite something. A Battle of Britain memorial. In full 3D, it's really worth a look. It's quite interesting. We're right opposite the London Eye, right by Big Ben. So let's see what we can see. Ooh, so much light in the lens. One problem, I can't see what's on my screen in bright sunlight, so I just have to hope that it works. The Battle of Britain, of course, is where the Royal Air Force prevented the German invasion effectively by defeating the German Air Force. Just. Outgunned and outnumbered, and still they won. Through cleverness, the use of radar, and careful husbanding of forces. The Blitz. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. In a way, if Britain had not won that battle, Hitler might have been able to invade Britain, although his navy might well have been defeated by the British Navy anyway, but the British Navy would have been crushed by the German Air Force. You see, so in that case the United States would not have had an air base and a landing point in Europe with which to assist with the Normandy invasions, so conceivably Hitler could have consolidated his gains in Europe and kept it. Or the Americans might have had to invade via, say, Spain and Portugal, perhaps, something like that, or through Italy in the south. Which might have worked, actually. But if Germany had defeated Britain, they would have captured Gibraltar and would have sewn up the Mediterranean. So, pretty important battle. And guess where we are, of course. Looking very yellowish in this light. It was super hot, bright sunlight though. One of Britain's really rare sunny days. 30 degrees or something like that. Or at least 28. We don't get many, but we do get a few. Well, the bus's signs don't flash like that, it's just because of interference with the strobe rate of the camera, the scanning rate. So let's walk down here. Big Ben is on my left, and Westminster Tube Station is on my right, through these arches. So this is where we are. See? A busy spot. Desperately trying to get past the slowpokes. Because there are some more gardens down here. Parliament Square it's called. Because it's square and it's opposite Parliament. Shiny shorts there. Now, how to get across there? Let's follow the crowd, since the lights are in my favour. There we have Westminster Abbey, or at least the one in the background is with the tall towers. I think this little church in front is called something else. But here we are in Parliament Square Gardens. And of course, first thing you see, Winston Churchill. Who else? And everybody wants to be photographed with him. Perhaps Britain's greatest leader, along with, say, Queen Elizabeth I, perhaps. And Sir Francis Drake, a very important character too in the history of Britain. Here we have David Lloyd George, actually. Yes, I get them mixed up. Yeah. I was going to say William Gladstone, but no. It's Lloyd George. Smuts. South African chappie. Jan Christian Smuts. Were important to do with some history with South Africa, of which I don't know very much again, as we were not really taught it in school, and I've read about it once or twice, but it hasn't sunk in. Don't use it much, you know. Viscount Palmerston. Later Lord Palmerston, I think. Unless there's another one. There's probably one every generation, isn't there? Can't quite see this one. Oh, Derby. The Derbys of Coalbrookdale were very important pioneers in the Industrial Revolution. There's more statues down there. But there's one across the road which is really worth seeing. That one. Do you recognise him? Will we focus? There we go. Abraham Lincoln. Outside the Supreme Court, in fact. There it is. There's another chappie here behind the coach. I don't know what he's well known for, so I can't really tell you much about him. Cannet or something like that. Can't remember the name. Didn't want to cross over with all that traffic and stuff. Lord Beaconsfield. Don't know much about him. Lots of tourists getting photographed with somebody here. Ah, Mahatma Gandhi, of course. Very famous Indian figure, lawyer, trained in South Africa. Went to India, got the British kicked out eventually. and we celebrate him here. Can't even see the name there. I think he's another industrial revolutionist. And of course we've got Mandela. Nelson Mandela. Obviously a very celebrated figure, but I'm a bit suspect about him because, I mean, when he was arrested he was in possession of 80,000 landmines, and he never did repudiate the use of violence to achieve his ends. So he worked to unify South Africa at the end, but his method of getting there a bit dodgy, other than spending 20 years in jail, of course. Yeah, Westminster Abbey, there you go. You can pay to go in there if you like. I don't like. Big Ben, here we are, just crossed over, and we're going to go to the right. Really an incredible building, Houses of Parliament. But here we have, if we can see him, Oliver Cromwell. Important figure in the English Civil War in particular. Executed King Charles I, abolished the monarchy, became Lord Protector of the country for a while, and after he died they reinstated the monarchy, but this time it was just a constitutional monarchy, not an absolute monarchy, under Charles II, Charles's son. So he basically enforced the sovereignty of Parliament on the Crown in the Glorious Revolution, as it was known. So you've got these security barriers outside Parliament to stop people ramming it with explosive trucks and stuff. And that too is a fantastic building, a part of that church. And King George V. Not quite sure why, but you know. In here we have Richard Coeur de Lion, that is Richard Lionheart. One of history's, or Britain's ancient psychopaths, I suppose. King Richard I. In those days they went out and fought with the army. Kind of a barbarian age. So he was after Jerusalem and stuff like that, I suppose. This is one of the entrances to the Houses of Parliament, I think, for visitors and on special occasions. There's another little liony thing here. Victoria Tower, I think this is called. And we just go beside it because there are yet more gardens. See, the windows are not lined up, that's unusual. Or they're lined up in a different way. Victoria Tower Gardens, there we go. And the first thing we see, Emmeline Pankhurst, I think, the suffragette, campaigner for women's vote. And that is Joe Moore, an MP who was shot by some nutcase prior to the Brexit vote. And the Stay campaign used her shamelessly to try and drum up support. Thought it was quite disgusting, frankly, but anyway. Even her husband was was using it publicity. He might as well have paid the guy to shoot her, I don't know. I presume he didn't, obviously, but kind of felt like even he was milking the publicity like crazy. I suppose he was wanting to promote her goals and aims, because she could no longer do so. Here's the first statue in here, or sculpture, I suppose. Just get in front of it where we can see it, because the sunlight otherwise will make it all black. The Burghers of Calais by Rodin. I don't know what the significance is, but some of them don't look very happy. And they have chains about their neck, so... The conservation of Rodin's Burghers of Calais. Blah blah blah. He's got a rope around his neck. Obviously something happened. But here we go, the riverside again. One thing about Brexit I've noticed is that there's actually quite a considerable amount of concern about world growth after Britain suddenly left the euro. As the fifth largest economy, it's surprising, really, that we do have such an effect. He fixed the... I presume he fixed the walls or the drains or something, I don't know. Here we are. Ook. It's a little hard to see, but... In that building opposite is not the... There's it's a hospital, and there is a memorial to Florence Nightingale, or a little museum. And here we have the home of the Archbishop of Canterbury, with the little castellations on that building and that tower. And that is Vauxhall Bridge. We are on the Silver Jubilee walkway, which goes all over the place. Done in 1977 for the Queen's Silver Jubilee. She's just had her golden one, I think, so... I've seen them both. But I am concerned not about world growth or anything. I'm really concerned that actually the world is heading for a major crash, because the countries of the world have been sitting with zero or close to interest rates. They've been doing quantitative easing, printing money more and more and more. It's addictive. The politicians are now addicted to it. What they should be doing is raising interest rates to try and normalise the economy. But they're keeping bad businesses alive, bad debts unpaid. The economy can only take it for so long before it all spills over and you get a tremendous crash. It's happened historically time and time again, really disastrous crashes or even hyperinflation. And the debts are now bigger than they were before the 2008 crash, a lot bigger, and what's being done? Just... The politicians are stuck in a vicious circle. They can't take the tough action needed to fix it, because it would anger the population, who are not really educated in these things and who would suffer. But they'd suffer less than if they allow it all to crash. But the crash can be fended off and fended off. There we go, the 150th anniversary of the Anti-Slavery Society. Britain being the first country, I think, in the modern world to abolish slavery. Or at all, actually. Although we still have people trafficking and stuff going on, but it's illegal. That's what abolishing it means. Making it illegal. Plus also Britain enforced it with wars against Spain and stuff like that. World War Zero, you could call it. These people are celebrating Love Parks Week. Some sheep, I think. Or goats, maybe. Children's play area, as you can see. Horse Ferry Playground. And if there is a big disastrous crash, it's nothing to do with Brexit, I would add. It's to do with quantitative easing, spending money. Read Emile Zola's Money or something like that. You'll get it's probably a free book on Gutenberg or somewhere because it's a classic. But this sort of thing has happened again and again and again. You've got tulipomania, you've got the Louisiana Trading Company, you've got the crashes in Scotland, actually, which were something to do with that, actually, which forced it or enabled it, as you think of it, to join the United Kingdom in order to rescue it from its debts, basically. This sort of thing, it happens again and again and again, one way or another, and the world is in an economic depression. They last about 25 years. We've been in it for maybe 10. You could treat the crash of 2008 as the start of it being visible, but it was building up for a long time before that. Things have been stagnant for some time, except in certain bubble markets. So 2008, we're going to be struggling with the economy for probably a long time, and because the boom prior was long, going from Second World War on to 2000, 50 years, we might expect actually the bust to be correspondingly long. It's usually shorter than the boom, but still proportional. We might well spend 30 years in slump. Japan has been depressed for 20 because they will not reform their economy properly. But these things spread worldwide. Oops, scared off the pigeon. And I don't know how to protect one's savings from it, because with a really bad crash, especially if the euro goes, which I think it will take people's savings with it, all of them, possibly. The government will be in such terrible debt that it will be appropriating people's money from their bank accounts, savings. They're already doing it a bit to rescue the banks. Bondholders and big savers have had haircuts on several occasions now. Cyprus, Austria. They're talking about it in Italy, but the Italian government is resisting it. We'll see if it will be acceptable in Germany, hey, when the time comes, because Deutsche Bank is close to failure. Big crisis. It won't be able to survive without being nationalised, basically, and that's true in much of the world. That we'll end up with a socialist financial system, at least for a time. And I think in the EU they will keep it socialist. They will not re-privatise it, I think, because a lot of the EU bureaucrats are communist sympathisers, and even some of them actually were communists in their youth. The Portuguese one, what's his name? I can't remember, anyway, for example. So they actually do want to bring down the capitalist system, I think, still. And the euro is kind of, to my mind, designed to do that. A single currency works well, say in the United States, which had 50 states, after all, has 50 states, but the original 13 were very, very close in the first place. They were small population, full of entrepreneurs and so on, very liberty orientated, culture pretty much the same throughout, and it worked. But Europe is not like that at all. I just don't really see it working. We will know because the financial conflagration, if it happens, I think it will happen fairly soon, and it's going to be terrible. What can you invest in if you have money? Goodness knows. Gold, but the government will certainly make it illegal to own it because they will need it all to help pay the debts, which it won't succeed in doing. But they'll succeed in taking your gold off you if you obey them, which of course we will all do. And the currency will crash. Maybe bonds, government bonds, private bonds, maybe even shares, I don't know, if you don't sell them during the disaster. If you have the guts to hang on through thick and thin when they're worth about 1/4 of a penny each, hang on and it'll all come back. Except of course many companies will crash and be lost too. That is MI5, that is where James Bond works. The Britain's Ministry of Intelligence Department 5 or Section 5 or something. Don't know what. 6 is the international spy thing. MI5 I think is I don't know. Bit like the NSA, is it, or like the CIA? I don't really know. But James Bond goes there when he can be bothered to turn up. Opposite it is the Tate Britain Art Gallery. Pretty good. The canteen in there is terrible. They do fish and chips, which is alright, but it's not cheap enough. What you get for the money is pretty bland and mediocre, but you know, if you don't mind eating junk, you can survive for a day. Britannia and another magpie. The Tate Britain. We're just going to go along here a little bit further, and then this particular walk finishes. Oh, that yellow thing is an amphibious tour bus. It can go on the roads, but it also goes in the river. They kind of catch fire or get stuck in the mud every now and then. They have a bit of a dodgy reputation, but of late. But they do look like quite fun. Here we are by Vauxhall Bridge. That is a Henry Moore statue or sculpture. Looks a bit dodgy if you ask me. More interesting actually is this prepossessing lump of stone. Near this site stood Millbank Prison, which was opened in 1816 and closed in 1890. This buttress stood at the head of the river steps from which until 1867 prisoners sentenced to transportation embarked on their journey to Australia. Transportation was the punishment for almost anything for a time in order to get Australia populated with slaves, or, well, wage slaves, prisoners basically. Stole a loaf of bread because you're starving, off to Australia with you. Some were allowed to come back when their sentence had run out, but they'd have to fund it themselves, so not many made it back. But they'd leave from here. Obviously the modern buildings were not there back then. And that would be the last they'd see of England and home, and they'd go to a sweltering, super hot climate full of poisonous creatures. And that's only the overseers. And that's the end of the walk. I hope you liked it. You can get to Vauxhall Tube Station by crossing the bridge there, or Pimlico is on this side up one of the streets. Bye for now.